Hey, I'm Alex,
And I'm Brandon.
and welcome to Living Electric.
We're both content creators and electric vehicle enthusiasts.
And through this podcast, we hope to share our experience with owning electric vehicles and help you join the electric life. All right, welcome to episode 9 of Living Electric. We're here with special guest Ken from EV Revolution Show. He's got over 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, over 1 million views on his channel. So happy to have him here today. Do you want to kind of give us a brief intro to what you do on your channel and how you're kind of driving EV adoption?
For sure. Well, again, thanks, Alex and Brandon, for having me on. I appreciate it. It's good to be talking to fellow people who are passionate about the EV revolution as well and what's going on. So yeah, I started my own channel. It'll be 3 years April now. So I've done over 155, 156 episodes, something like that now on the video side. I also do audio podcasts where I've done, I don't know, 25, 26, something like that. And do the same thing for the audio where I try to get a guest on a Zoom call or something, and the guest could be anywhere in the world. That makes it easy. For the YouTube show, I originally actually started a YouTube channel with Trevor Page doing the Model 3 Owners Club. So that's how I originally got into the
Okay.
YouTube thing back in 2016. And my motivator was the Model 3 reveal. I watched that the next day, not live, but the next day early in the morning, saw an affordable EV from a brand that I only looked at before as a very high-end luxury brand, going, this is something I could afford. And at the time, I was also reading the newspapers here in Ontario about some EV incentives and rebates that they had. At the time, it was around 11,000 that you could get off. And I'm going, money off a car, and Tesla's coming out with this lower price model that is going to be more, more reasonable. When I added it all up, the numbers started to look good. So I put my $1,000 down and got really interested in searching everything on the internet about Tesla and the Model 3, and ran across Trevor. And he had started a forum, and I reached out to him. He's local here in Toronto area. And I said, hey, do you want to start like a YouTube channel and try to build a community and follow it? And he said, yeah. So we started doing the Model 3 Owners Club, and we grew that to I helped him grow that to about 45,000, almost 50,000 subs before I wanted to actually continue with my own outreach, because to me the AV environment is much more than one brand or one region, one country, right? It's got to
For
be a
sure.
global phenomenon, as you guys know. So Trevor and I are still good buddies. We collaborate a lot, but he's very passionate about Tesla, and that's his messaging, and that's great. Our objectives are both the same. We want to get I want to get butts into EV seats, so to speak. So there's all kinds of different ways to do it, more creative and entertaining. And I take more of a kind of a new style. I look at my approach as, like the average Joe consumer. What's how can it really how can an EV impact and benefit somebody's life? And in a lot of cases, it can't still today. There's not enough choice, not enough, prices are high. There's all kinds of reasons, but I see you guys just did a show about what's coming up in 2022 this year, and I did one too recently. So it's just mind-boggling the number of EVs that are coming out, and that's what we need for consumers: more choice, more infrastructure, and that just helps us to be empowered to get the message out.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting what's happening in 2022. I mean, like 2020 I always thought was like that magic year of EVs, and now I think it's actually 2022.
I would agree.
it's
Yep.
it's crazy. It's almost like every day you turn around and there's some new unveiling, there's new electric vehicle opportunities and options out there for consumers. So, that's really cool. I was
Mhm.
going to ask you, Ken. So it seems like the Model 3 was the EV that really got you interested in electric cars. Were you always interested in EVs, or was that kind of the beginning point for you?
That was probably more substantial of a beginning point for me. I had followed EVs a little bit. I knew of, the Nissan Leaf. I had seen the Mitsubishi iMEVs, the Volts, so kind of the plug-in hybrid approach. I had been experienced to that, but never really followed it that much. My wife and I did investigate EVs back in, I think it was the earlier part of 2016. We looked at the original Kia Soul and some of the offerings that were out there, but 100 miles ish or so, 150, 160 kilometers on a good day, isn't that attractive for the price point, especially at that time. So it was something I just kind of kept on the back burner, and I'll continue to watch the industry and see what happens. And of course, as we all know here, and I think most of the listeners and viewers watching this know that Tesla really, with the Model 3 reveal, kind of was a major tipping point for the EV landscape, right? It shone a light onto a market that most of the OEMs didn't really have a lot of efforts into at that time, right? In 2016,
Hmm.
when you get 130,000 people putting money down on a car unseen, until the live broadcast, that's unheard of, right? I compare that to, I think the closest thing was maybe the 64 and a half Ford Mustang, where they got around 60,000 or so reservations for that. But that was when people could see a car, up on a
Hmm.
stand or something. So
Yeah.
to get that, and then, another 300,000 or 400,000 reservations on top of it, I think it shook up the auto industry, and it proved that an affordably, a well-priced, a well engineered and thought out, and all the benefits of charging and range could be exciting for the public. And you mentioned, Brandon, about all these unveilings and things that are coming out. It takes automakers about 5 to 6 years to get from something on a napkin to something rolling off a production line. That's
Yeah.
kind of their phase. So we're at that point, right? 2016, 2017, 2018, these OEMs were woken up, were shaken up by Tesla, saying, gee, we better get into this game, because look how many people are actually looking at an EV back then, never mind what they're looking at today.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned I feel like every time we have a guest on the show, there's always something that's mentioned that like just blows my mind. That you're right. Like when Model 3 was unveiled back in 2016, and it has been, 6, 7 years now. So I guess it is time for these vehicles to be unveiled. So that makes more
Absolutely.
realistic sense to me now.
It
Yeah.
does. We get a lot of people. I do a lot of outreach. I'm part of the equivalent to your EVAA, I think it is, down Electric Vehicle Association of America. We have
Mhm.
Electric Vehicle Society of Canada. I'm a member of that. I'm also a member of the local Tesla, because I think you're going to want to know what I drive today. So I'm part of that. But I do a lot of public outreach stuff, community outreach, speaking. I go on a radio once every couple of weeks to our local radio, and they get me on
Oh
talking
wow.
about everything. They actually want me to talk about cars in general, but I always bring it back to EVs. I'm their EV guy. I've been on CBC The National to do a spot and stuff. So I'm out there trying to educate. And I do always say that I think the Model 3 reveal was kind of like the iPhone moment for EVs,
Mhm.
right? It really, because again, Elon, he's a smart guy. I really appreciate what he does, but he's a businessman as well. And he's got to make a dollar doing this, and they are now. But he didn't reinvent an EV. He didn't reinvent their vehicle, a car, right? It was already there. He just packaged it to provide a better user experience, or a better driver experience, and adding in some affordability. And that's what Steve Jobs did to the phone, right? We had, maybe you guys are younger than I am, but I remember the Palm Trios and the
Oh yeah.
Blackberries and all these kind
Yep.
of devices. So we kind of had smartphones back, when the iPhone original came out. So it wasn't a new per se technology, but it was the way that that user experience could be had. And the application store was, of course, what really drove the iPhone, because now you could do, instead of just making a call and do an email and send some text, you could do almost anything on that thing.
Mhm.
And I think that's what Elon did to the EV industry, is he really helped shake it up by bringing something that was an easy user experience, and a very nice user experience, and bringing sort of that affordability factor. So that's kind of what I talk about, my EV tipping point. That's kind of one of them. I have another one if you want me to get into it later, but
Yeah.
that we've seen. Well, I'll say it now. To me, last year's Ford F-150, that was the second big, I think,
Yep.
Yeah.
TV tipping point, right? Because that, now you're taking something that was kind of periphery and fringe, and you're bringing it into the heart of the workforce, right? Be
Hmm.
it, I'm in Canada, so we're very similar to the US as far as the marketplace goes. SUVs and pickups are the number one vehicles here in Canada as well in the US. In Europe, it's different. They have a much more larger variety. China, of course, all these other countries that are buying lots of vehicles, so their needs are different. But here, the F-150 reigns supreme as well. When you take a halo product, not a halo product, but a sacrilegious product like the F-150 is, 44 years, I think, the number one vehicle, best-selling vehicle, that Ford has, and you electrify it, you've got to really know what you're doing. I mean, they shook the landscape with the Mustang, but the F-150, like, no, that's, you can't be touching that.
Yeah.
And when they really go full tilt at it, to me, that now shines a light on a different marketplace and a different consumer and buyers that
Mhm.
maybe would not have thought about an EV before. And we're seeing that Ford is successful. They've got more pre-orders than they can can get out the door for the next couple of years. They're going to ramp up more production, which is all good for us. So absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel the same way about the F-150 for all the reasons you just mentioned. It's very much like that when EVs kind of break into that mainstream, like, okay, this is the top selling vehicle. Now we're making it electric. Do you think the Mach-E was kind of a like trial run for Ford to say, can we make just a normal SUV before we bring it to the F-150?
I think it was a bit of a trial run. You're right. Certainly from a retooling a plant and getting the production process going, dealing
Mm,
with the battery and all those different supply chain, different metrics, because you've got less moving parts, right, in an EV, especially in all electric, than you do in an internal combustion. So there's a lot of changes that they had to go to on the back end to get that product out. But again, they wanted to launch an all EV, a first, homegrown developed EV. They had some electrified vehicles before, right? I
mm-hmm.
believe they had the Focus and some of the
Mhm.
others that were out there, the C-Max plugins and stuff. So they had some stuff going, but they're full ground up, and to take again a marquee brand like the Mustang. Everybody knows Ford for their Mustang. They're either going to know it for the pickup or the Mustang or both.
Yep.
And to electrify it was really a bit of a test, but it was really kind of a placeholder to say, look, we're getting into this game and we're serious about it. Because I
Mhm.
I do get lots of comments, and I talk to people that say, no, Tesla's really the only one doing something. Everybody else is kind of blowing smoke. And I said, no, not really. I mean, they're committing billions and billions of dollars to retooling, contracting, supply chain, all this kind of stuff, to investments that they are going to have to see a return on that investment at some point,
Mhm.
because after all, automakers are a business. They're not charity
Yep.
organizations.
Yeah.
So they're only doing this because they know they're going to get the money back in those future sales. So when you see these big companies like Ford, GM, FCO, Stellantis, and the others that are putting big money into and talking about strategic plans for this decade and beyond that heavily include electrification. I mean, GM was the first company to say by 2035, I believe it's either 2030 or 2035, you correct me, but no more ICE Vs, like we're stopping it. So that's a big deal for a 100-year-old company, right?
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Yeah, I think, like kind of just going back to like the F-150 Lightning unveil, Alex and I did a live stream on YouTube of that, and
Mhm.
it was incredible to watch the internet's reaction to the F-150 Lightning. Like, I feel like the Mach-E at first was kind of like, oh no, they shouldn't have called it a Mustang. We've driven both performance versions of it, and it's a Mustang. Like, it handles like one. It's a
Absolutely.
great
Beautiful.
vehicle.
Mhm.
But it was so cool to me to see how welcoming everybody was of taking that iconic nameplate F-150 and electrifying it, let alone the Lightning nameplate, because that already
Mhm.
existed with a more
That's right.
performance oriented version, I think in the 90s
I
or
remember it
early
well.
2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, part of the SVT, I believe, group, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to see how open people are to that, to take those nameplates, and I think Ford is just going to keep doing it.
I totally agree. And, you asked earlier about some of my background. I am a car guy going back. So, I got my first
Okay.
car when I was 16. And as soon as I got my license, I got some, a Chevy Vega. It was my first, beater car, because it was either that or the public transit or riding my bike. And I'm going, in Canada in the winter, I'm not riding my bike. So,
No,
Yeah.
I'm
that'd be
getting I'm
cool.
getting whatever I can get, and never looked back. I've had some Camaros, I've had, Fords with big 351s and all this kind of stuff. Got into chipping cars in the 2000s and all that import scene. I did some of that. So I'm not an expert, but I've been around cars a long time and had many different cars. And I can appreciate that passion. And as you said, it absolutely is really nice to see people that are passionate about those marquee brands when an OEM decides to electrify them, and they're very positive in that. Because I believe Ford had some initial backlash on the Mustang. There were the
Hmm.
diehards that were
Hmm.
going, wait, you can't touch this, right? This is a different vehicle. But I think they're all starting to see. And one of the things we do, and I'm sure you run across it when you're out talking to people, we do things like car shows where we'll go into this uh, car show that's all hot rods and imports and all this kind of different kind of vehicles, and we'll go in there with a cluster of EVs, and these guys will come up, why are you guys here? And we just start talking about torque. What do you know? You got 400 foot-pounds and blah blah blah, 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. They go, what? Really? Like, never, don't talk about environment, don't talk about total cost of ownership, because that's not the right audience. They're
Yep.
gearheads, right? I get it. So, it's all about framing it and positioning EVs in the right realm that makes a significant context for those listeners.
For sure. So you said I guess, day two reservation owner or reservation holder for the Model 3,
Day
right?
two. But my story is a little different because I actually never carried out on that day two reservation. So, and
Really?
there's
Okay.
the reason
Let's hear it.
for it is because in Canada, so it's interesting because Trevor and I actually went down to Fremont for the first delivery. So we were there in July of 2017 on site.
Wow.
We were part of the crowd there, part of the media that were there, although other YouTubers that were there, was covering that, and it was exciting. I got very excited. And so I definitely wanted a Model 3, but what had happened here in Ontario is we knew in 2018, when Tesla Model 3s were starting to be delivered in the late spring, so May, June of 2018 timeframe, they were only delivering the top spec, right? That's what we see from all the OEMs.
Yep.
They come out with a model and it's a top spec first, and they roll back the lower trims. I was holding out for a base model. Like, I wasn't looking at an affordability at a top spec. And that was all that was coming for the next few months. And at the same time, we were going through coming up to a provincial election where the polling was showing that the government was going to change away from a government that was currently promoting EV incentives of $14,000 here in Ontario to a new government that was going to promote zero. He said day one, he's cutting anything that has the word green in it. And sure enough, in September he did. So knowing that we were going to lose that incentive, I didn't want to lose $14,000. I'm being selfish. So I said, well, what else can I get then? I'm really wanting to get an electric vehicle because we have a couple of ICE cars. So it's a perfect opportunity to try, right? Get rid of one. I looked around, I tried everything available, and I ended up getting a 2018 40 kilowatt Nissan Leaf. And I loved it. I ran that for 2 years, about 45,000 kilometers or so. You could figure out the mileage. I had zero issues, no problems. It was a great vehicle. But I had always wanted the Model 3, specifically because of the range and the infrastructure that supports the Tesla environments today, Tesla vehicles today. And my job is, when we're not locked down with COVID and pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, I'm in sales, so I have a fairly big Southern Ontario territory to cover. I could go to Ottawa or Windsor or up, mid-North Ontario, and a 40 kilowatt Leaf is going to struggle in the winter with those kind of, mileage, to have to really a multiple charge. So even though I love the vehicle, the long-term vision for me was I wanted something with the most range that I could get. And, up until like very, very recently, Tesla still is kind of the king of range for most of their vehicles. So I ended up getting a Model 3 in September of last year, of 2020.
Nice.
So it's been a year now, just over a year I've had my Model 3. So as part of my channel, I do all the regular EV stuff with news and car reviews. I'm also a member of AJAC, which is the Automobile Journalists Association of Canada. So I take what I do part-time seriously as a journalist. So, YouTube's just the medium that I use because it's an inexpensive medium to use. Once you got all the gear, as you guys know, the gear kills you, I tell you. It's a lot of stuff out there. But once you're set up, it's not so bad. It's a lot of time, but YouTube's a good medium to use. So I take that approach versus a print or a digital medium that a lot of the other auto journalists do. So I am part of that circle where I get invited to OEM launches, and sometimes I get lucky and they fly me down as part of a team, but I'm involved in that business side, the B2B side of it too. I could go to car shows on press days and things like that. So that's the approach that I bring to my channel is that outlook. And then with my Model 3, I wrap in a bit of a Tesla angle where I talk about my experiences, what my 3, and I do promote some accessories with it, because I do get some companies that say, hey, do you want to promote this stuff for us if we send you something? I said, sure, why not? So if it makes sense,
For sure.
because as you guys know, there's lots of stuff out there. So I do a little bit of that with the Model 3 stuff. But again, my prime effort on the channel is the continuous education and awareness of electric vehicles that I try to bring from a bit more of a global perspective, not just Canada and the US, even though the majority of my listening bases in those two countries. But in Europe, I have a big following in Europe as well. So the only country, excuse me, I don't really focus a lot on is China. I do talk about it once in a while, but as you guys know, there's so much going on there.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
40% of the global plug-in markets in China, and they've got dozens and dozens and dozens of models and manufacturers there, right? It's a big deal. And I just don't have the bandwidth to really dig down deep on that as well.
For sure. I'm curious, switching from the Nissan Leaf to the Model 3, what's one thing you appreciated about the Model 3 when you switch, and what's one thing you miss from your Leaf?
Great question. Well, the range, instantaneous, the range doubled. So that was a no-brainer. That's the one thing. And the one thing I miss, I do have to admit that the ride in the Leaf was, in my opinion, better from a comfort level. So it wouldn't track, of course, something, better than a Model 3, but from an everyday, we have a lot of crappy roads around here, potholes and things like that. So from an everyday drivability, I found the Leaf to be more comfortable, especially for passengers, and quieter. It had a combination of both. But I do love my Model 3. I would like it to be a little quieter, but I blare my music so loud it doesn't really matter. It's not that bad. I don't want people to think that it's like a driving a trucker. It's not. But it's noticeable, as you guys have been in different vehicles, like you mentioned the Mach-E. That was a super quiet car. So compares, I just was in San Diego for the Ioniq 5 stuff by Hyundai, and wow, we were driving in like one of the worst storms in the California coast that for a while, that day that we actually took it out, us Canadians, and it was very quiet, and very, very, so much different. But I ended up changing the suspension. That's one of my episodes, is I changed out the stock suspension on the Model 3 to something a bit softer, an aftermarket kit that's out there, but just for me, because I wanted something a little bit, especially for passengers. So that's probably the negative that I would say about it. But a lot of people are fine with it. So it really is a personal choice, right, as far as that goes. But yeah, hands down, it's just a fun car to drive. And again, EVs are simple. Just get in and go. Don't worry about all the other stuff that people talk about and this and that. Just get in, especially from a daily driver, like plug it in and then night, and then get up in the morning and go, and don't worry about it. And that's where I'm at. So.
Do you still have both cars?
No,
or
so we
trade in?
Yeah, we ended up trading in the Leaf. We actually sold it. I sold it privately because Tesla's notoriously terrible for used cars. Trade-in values.
They are pretty bad.
Do you guys know that or not? But
I used to work for Tesla, so
did you? Okay. So I'm not blaming them because
I lived through Model 3 Day, the reservation day.
Did you?
And that was
oh my goodness,
one of the highlights of my life so far. So
I bet.
Yes,
but I got a few battle wounds for that.
Oh, it was a fun day. It was, I think, like a 15-hour day, but it was great. We had pizza, so
nice.
Nice. Yeah, there's pizza involved.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to be the best for trading values, because if you won't take it, then there's another guy behind you that will. So it's one of those good problems to have. But so I was lucky that I was able to actually sell it back to the dealer that I bought it from, who was one of the very pro-electric Nissan dealers in the Greater Toronto area. And I said, this is the price I want. I think it's fair for both of us. You can mark it up, and I can get more than what Tesla's. And I sold it back. And then I also traded in. So we had 3 cars. So we went from the Leaf and 2 ICE vehicles to the Model 3 and 1 ICE vehicle. So we ended up cutting 1 car off as well. And my motto is educating, minds one tailpipe at a time. So I tried to lead by example as getting rid of another tailpipe in our family. So we do have a small Nissan Versa, which is a great little runabout that our daughter primarily uses. But our daily driver is the Model 3, and I'm 99% driving it. It was a year September, right? So where are we at? 15 months, and I've got 33,000 kilometers and climbing.
Wow.
It's just one of the things with EVs, right? I think you guys know, you just want to get in and drive the thing. Oh, I'll go get milk. I'll go to the store. We're out of bread. Sure. It's just such a pleasant experience. So even in winter weather and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it gets driven all out. And we did do a long trip as well. I noticed you guys talked about some long trip EVing in one of your shows, and and again, I wanted to try it. So in the Leaf, I would have been much more challenging in a 40 kilowatt Leaf. So again, you got to know the limits of what you're getting into. As a secondary car, the Leaf, I think that 40 kilowatt, and for most people, it's a great, but as you know, we've kind of advanced a little bit more beyond that range now in most of the vehicles today. But we did a trip to the East Coast of Canada in August of last year and back on the Model 3, and it was just plug the destination in and let the computer tell you where to stop and for how long, and it works like a charm. It's really, as you know, Brandon, worked for Tesla, it really is good. And that's one of the unique benefits that Tesla still brings to the marketplace, is the ability to have that guidance, because they own their own network and they monitor their own network, so they can bring that technology in. It's hard to get that with other vehicles. You can, but everybody asks, well, Hyundai, like, why don't you show, all the stations and stuff? They said, well, we can show you stations, but it's going to be hard for us to tell you, which one to stop at and for how long, because we can tell you what your state of charge will be when you get there, if you program that as your destination. But whereas Tesla can take it another step, because they own all that infrastructure and monitor it, and they can tell you, yeah, when you get there, you'll have 4 stalls open and you'll sit there for 18 minutes, and then you'll be able, and the car tells you you're ready to go, right? So it's a unique experience that they're the only ones that can offer that today, because of that infrastructure that they have. And as you know, Brandon, working for them, if you build it, they will come. That mantra that Elon did was exactly right. That's what they needed to get over that curve. So they still have competitive advantage there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. My main job for my day-to-day full-time job is with a company called ChargeWay. I'm not sure if you've heard of us.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the database manager on the team, and I'm
Nice.
constantly monitoring supercharger expansions, and it's insane. It's like every day there's 4 or 5 new ones in the US, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, can us non-Tesla drivers get some of that? Like,
Well, they have opened it up, but I do get a lot of questions. I think probably, I think range anxiety is almost a thing of the past. I say almost because it's still dependent on where you live, right? There's some, I'm not sure how Ohio is, but I know upper New York State, there's still some barren, wastelands there, right? And other places like in Canada, you go above, where all the urban populations are, it can be very iffy to find a charge anywhere. But barring that, there are more and more non-Tesla entities building out really good charging networks. You guys have a lot with EA and EVgo and a bunch of others that are going, state to state. You've got gas providers like Shell now saying we're going to throw them and get, in a lot of gas stations. We've done that in Canada with our Petro-Canada. We've got a coast-to-coast network, a non-Tesla network with them, CCS and Chatamo. We've got Electrify Canada, going to be coast to coast within the next 3 or 4 years as they roll out. So there are other alternatives to people that maybe don't want to get a Tesla and need to understand that there is a good charging environment. I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying, well, a lot of the analysts feel that we need more charging stations. It was a Canadian specific conversation saying that the government really needs to step up and provide thousands more charging stations in order to promote EV adoption, because we're so far behind the rest of the world. And I said, well, maybe if you look at the numbers per capita, we might be behind, but flip it the other way. If I ask you two guys, where do you both have an EV today? You guys? Yeah. Okay.
I've got a Model 3, and Brandon's they've got an ID4 right now.
Nice.
Also a Chevy Bolt.
Good for you. And a Bolt. Excellent.
Yep.
Both, all good, great
Working
vehicles.
on trading in, right?
Working on trading in the Bolt?
Potentially both.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. Have a new battery pack though, and new BMS.
I actually did turn that down. I'm waiting on a buyback. Yeah, just because I'm ready for a new EV. The Bolt's been a fantastic car, but I'm ready to experience another one.
I hear you. I hear you. But I am assuming then that probably the both of you guys charge most of your charging time is spent at home, right? You probably have a level 2. If not, you're using a 110, but looks like you guys both have level 2s at home of some sort. And I would guesstimate that probably the vast majority of your charging experience is done at home versus a third party. And so that's the conversation I flipped is, well, maybe numbers wise, we might not be there per capita based on Norway or other countries. But the thing is, most people can charge at home. So take away people that live in condos and that have houses that are, don't have garages or anything like that. They have to have street parking like in really urban. So take all that out of the equation. in Canada, the number for the US is probably going to be 10 to 100 times more. But in Canada, we have about 8 million single detached homes, single family detached homes in
Okay.
here. So to me, that means roughly 8 million people or so, take away a little bit of that, have the ability to probably get a level 2 or at least have a plug to something externally, right? To be able to
Mm-hmm.
charge. So that's a huge audience. We only have about, I think, maybe 200,000 to 300,000 EVs today on the roads in Canada. So we have a long way to go. We have a large consumer group to go after if we just even focus the messaging there, because most of the people, once they get an EV, if they have the ability to charge at home, they will charge at home for most of their needs. And when you get a vehicle today that gives you 300 miles, 475 to 500 kilometers of daily range, even 200 miles in the winter or 350 kilometers up here, that's virtually more than most people need for a daily use case. I think it's 40 miles, 60 kilometers, or whatever it is, the average. So chances are, the people get in their head, oh yeah, we need more charging infrastructure, but the reality is you kind of don't for most of what you're doing. And if you're going to grandma's in Vancouver once a year and you're really worried about it, then rent a car and do it, and
Yeah.
do it for that 2 weeks, or whatever it's going to be, if you really want to do that. So there are a lot of ways to, I think, present the information to consumers in a factual way, because I'm not spinning things, like a national choir or something. I'm being honest, but there's one way to look at it, then there's another way to look at something, and give people that balance so they can make informed and educated decisions.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I think the way that Alex and I approach things are very similar. We provide the facts, we educate as clearly as we can to consumers and everyday drivers and help them
Mm-hmm.
feel comfortable with what they're looking into. And I think a lot of it is that you almost have to get out of that mindset that you are going to be doing those 500-mile trips every day, when in reality you might only do that once or not even every
That's
year.
right. Yeah.
So if you kind of reevaluate where you're driving and like how often you drive, EVs are very realistic for, I would say, the majority of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree. Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. Because you're right. And if there's that one guy that says, no, 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 I do drive 300 miles a day because,
Hmm.
that's what I need to do. All right, then maybe you should wait a little bit. You're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and you need 300 miles a day in the dead of winter. Okay, maybe you should wait for a little bit longer till we get something that can handle that, that range. Maybe buy a Lucid Air or something. But
Yes, I was going to say, yeah.
there are things. But the reality is, you're right. It's not for everybody. But understanding what their needs are and
Hmm.
mapping that into what's there. The I think the biggest barrier to adoption now, because the price is slowly coming down. You mentioned you have an ID4, Brandon. To me, that's probably the best valued EV here in Canada, and I would argue the US, from a price point for what you get as a nice package.
Hmm.
And then you factor in some incentives. I don't know if you guys have state incentives in Ohio. You can, I know there's the Fed tax credit, but do you have any
Yep.
other local incentives? No.
No,
No.
no. And in fact, they actually just tacked on an annual registration fee for
Of course,
EVs.
because
So,
you're not paying road tax, right, through
yep.
the gas. So
Yep.
they're gonna, yeah, I've seen that spin. That's unfortunate, but they'll wake up. But the reality is, there are other places, of course, especially in Canada, like BC and Quebec, which are the two provinces leading EV adoption here in Canada, that have very lucrative incentives. So you look at something like an ID4, you can get out the door to the base Pro model. We have only two trims here for, in BC, let's say in Quebec, for, into the low 40s, if not the high 30 Canadians. So, you
Yeah.
guys can do the math there. And that's a pretty compelling vehicle for that price. So
Oh,
there
yeah.
are a lot, you can spend as much as you want, but if you really want to, conserve some cash, I think there are some very good options that are out today, which are only going to get better. So
Hmm.
barring the price, I think, as you guys said, the education and awareness part is probably the number one barrier to adoption. People just don't know. They just don't understand
Yes.
how easy an EV can fit into your life, if it makes sense.
Hmm.
For sure. So we teased the Bolt buyback.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what EV do you recommend for Brandon to replace his Bolt.
Before you answer
Yeah.
that, I do want to just let you know the Ioniq 5 is up on my list, and you
Beautiful.
mentioned that
Nice.
it was very quiet to drive, so I'm pleased to hear that. But I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
It's an excellent machine. The good thing, Brandon, is as we started talking earlier in the show, is that the amount of new EVs are going to be hopefully hitting showroom floors this year, pending chip shortages and logistic challenges and supply chain issues, with batteries and everything as well. We knew we'd hit this point eventually, right? We're going to dip a little bit and then go back up again. It's just natural. There's a lot more choice for you to select in that type of a secondary vehicle. That's what it sounds like. You may be looking for. The Ioniq 5 is a great vehicle. I mean, Hyundai's priced that at the right points here in Canada as well in the US. Here in Canada, like in Ontario, it qualifies for our a national rebate, which is 5,000 at every trim level, which is almost
Wow.
unheard of, right? Tesla just moved the Model 3 out of it, in Canada. The standard range plus now is over the threshold, so it doesn't qualify anymore. It's only I don't know if you guys have it, but we have the 150-kilometer software locked version, and
Yeah,
that
we
was
don't have
only
that one.
brought in to meet that federal mandate of a minimum MSRP. And I think in the year and a half, I think there might be 6 or 10 people in all of Canada that have bought that model because nobody's really buying them. It's just there, right? Now that they've moved the standard range plus out of that was the only model that really fit. It might slow down some Canadian sales, but I say some because it's just such a big book that they've got now, right? An order book. It's unheard of. But there are a lot more EVs that now can take advantage of those rebates. So, the Ioniq 5, I mean, I like the new Bolt EUV. I really, really like the new Bolts. I mean, the Achilles heel is just their fast charging, in my opinion. Everything else is solid about it. It's just, if you're going to do a lot of road tripping, hitting the wall at 70, 72, whatever kilowatts, it's just, if you're okay with that, then you're okay with that. Tremendous value, right? For that. And it's got all the other pluses. The Ioniq 5, I think, is right in that wheelhouse. You've already got an ID4. The South Koreans are making and have made excellent EVs. I mean, their history is taking existing platforms, like the Soul and like the Nero, and like the original Ioniq and the Kona, and taking those platforms and electrifying them. And they've done fantastic jobs with those vehicles, right? The Kona is one of the most efficient vehicles out there when you look at the numbers. So now they've got this new platform, right? The GEMP platform, and they're able to now have a ground up design and really, bring much more density, much more features to that platform, to the punch. So, the Ioniq 5, the EV6, I'm super stoked about those two products. We don't have pricing yet here in Canada, and I haven't seen it in the US yet on the EV6.
Yeah, not yet.
Not
Hopefully
yet.
soon, though.
Yeah, I'm anticipating it's going to be a little higher than the Ioniq 5, but I don't know. Like, I don't have facts. That's what I'm hearing. So we'll wait and see. But I think those are two really solid vehicles to watch for, especially in that if you're looking at that class. But even all the other premium guys, like BMW is ramping up like crazy, right? I mean, almost every week there's another iX something coming out, and of course Mercedes with all the different models that are coming at the higher end. They just talked about their concept vehicle today. So you've got choice there. Genesis is a higher dollar brand, a premium brand for HMC. So, that might be priced out of that wheelhouse, and somebody like yourself is looking to replace a Bolt. I don't know what Nissan, I do. In fact, they have come out with US pricing, right? The Nissan Aria, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, I think it starts at $45,000 or $46,000.
45.
Yeah.
And for you guys, the Ioniq 5 starts at what? Is it under 40? Is it the 38.9 or something like that?
I think 39.8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I believe so.
All right. So that could be a comparable vehicle. I'm sure the Aria will have thermal management and all the stuff that Nissan should have had a few years ago, but didn't. But we get why. So there's that. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the Polestar 2. I thought it was a great vehicle. The single motor variant is really efficient and pretty good range.
Yeah, we actually had a chance to rent one from Enterprise when we went to Los Angeles. Alex
Nice.
and my husband and I, we were there for a
Yeah,
media event, and
nice.
we had one for 4 days, and it was a fun car.
It
Yeah,
is a fun car. Yeah,
it was
very
top
fun
of the
car.
line one, so it wasn't the front wheel drive, but
Yeah,
um,
and
still a blast.
for again, and for something that's built by a Chinese company, in China, I believe. I don't think they're all built in China and then shipped globally, my understanding. It's a very high quality, right? Fit and finish, no squeaks and rattles. I mean, these are really nice cars. So you've got some options there. It's too bad we don't have some of the European stuff like Skoda and Citroen and some of the other brands that are taking MEB platforms and some of the other VW and some of their companies, Stellantis lines, and electrifying them, because there's a lot of really good options that Europe has. So I mean, in that class, you've got the ID, you've got the Ioniq 5 EV6. I would still lump the Bolt into that, because it's the affordability. Here, the Mustang starts at a very high price, the Mach-E, so it's hard to compare apples to apples on that. And then you still got some of the legacy, like the Neros, the Souls, the Konas, if you're interested in those. There is an update coming this year for the Nero. I don't know if it's going to have different powertrain, but I'm guessing that they probably will tweak it a bit, maybe tweak the batteries, make them a bit more denser, have something newer, maybe a little bit more powerful motors to get a little bit quicker. But I thought the Nero, it was my 2019 EV pick of the year. And I had people going, why aren't you picking the Model 3? I said, well, because the Model 3's got a lot of eyeballs on it because it's sexy and it's Tesla and all that stuff. But, the reality is, in my opinion, of that in 2019, the Kona was just a nice sized vehicle. Sorry, the Nero was just, it wasn't too big, wasn't too small, had good dimensions, had really good, decent range for it, 300, like 250 miles at the time, 380, 400 kilometers, decent fast charging, and you just get in and go in these things. You really don't, and they're well equipped, very solid built. I've reviewed all these vehicles, so it was my pick of the year. Now in 2020, I picked the Model 3 because knowing that it was going to really surge from a sales and kind of take that leadership, and that was really the thing that was going to kind of elevate the EV industry to the next level, which it did. And then last year, my pick of the year was actually a Chinese model, was the Wuling Mini EV, because here you had a $5,000 US vehicle that's sold almost as many as Tesla has sold Model 3s globally. And that's just in one country.
Wow.
So, they're probably going to hit 450 to 500,000 units. I haven't seen December's numbers for them, but, in a car that people are saying, wow, it's not that safe. But for the market that it's designed for, as an urban commuter, and all the bells and whistles that you get from in China from having an EV, right? You get your license plates for free. You get all registration. Like, apparently you have to wait like 2 years to get a license plate or something to registration a car. It's a big deal in China.
Wow.
Whereas everything is fast tracks if you get what they call an NEV, a new energy vehicle, something like that, which is just their versions of plugins, right? So so that motivates people to look at these, and it's, what do I have? Do I get a scooter and boot around in a scooter in the rain, or do I get something that has windshield and air conditioning, right, for the same money? So it was a compelling vehicle. Again, kind of brought in some of the affordability, and I'm sure you guys are seeing that. There are guys like Candy that have come into to the US. VinFast is coming hard this year to both your market and my market here. They're going to push real hard. Again, I don't know the quality. They're a younger company, so all I know is that they've been building cars for BMW in Asia Pac for the last 9 years, so they got something behind them. So these are some of the guys that are going to help bring that affordability down, right? Because if you look at, you guys talked about the 2022 list, a lot of those cars are pretty expensive, right? Cadillac Lyrics and Hummer EVs and all this kind of stuff. They're not cheap, but these other guys are going to come in, and bring some of that price points down. But then you do have values like the ID4 and others that are out there. So to give you, Brandon, a recommendation, I mean, I think you're in the right wheelhouse of looking at what you're looking at. It's going to come down to, what's the best, budget, what fits your budget, what fits your ergonomic needs. Like, if you need cargo capacity, Ioniq 5 is a little lean when it comes to trunk space. I haven't seen the EV6 if it has the exact same trunk or not on those models. But so those kind of things I think are going to come into play for you. Hopefully that
Okay.
helps, because most
Yeah.
people I'll
Yeah.
say is what's your daily driving range? Like what's your habits? Do you need 500 miles every day?
Yeah.
Okay, then go to Ford and buy a gas car or whatever.
Yeah.
Wait a little longer. So hopefully
Yeah.
that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I still think the Ionic 5 is up there on my list. Top three right now are Ionic 5, Model 3, and then a Polestar 2.
Yeah.
Those
Okay.
are top three right now. Not in any
Yeah.
specific order, but
Yeah.
that definitely helps.
Yeah. And
Thanks,
the
Ken.
Model 3 speaks for itself. I mean, there's
Yeah.
tons of people, Alex, you have one. I'm sure you love it, right?
Hmm.
You're smiling when you're thinking of it. So that's just inherent with EVs, but certainly, the Model 3. I mean, the biggest thing that I get on my Model 3 is it's just effortless. It's just an
Hmm.
effortless vehicle, right? Don't really have to think about charging. Just plug it in every night, go to 85, whatever, 87% kind of thing. If I needed to take a road trip, at least where I live in southern Ontario and most of southern Canada, there's superchargers everywhere, and they continue, as you said earlier, to pop up all the time. So I don't really need to worry about road tripping. If I need to go somewhere for business or pleasure, we just do it now. Like I'm going to go back to the fully charged shows, and I was all ready to drive to Austin for this year, but then they've moved it to San Diego. So I got to think about that. It's a lot longer drive to San Diego than it is to Austin, but it's doable, right? On something like that. And when you look at the Ionic and the EV6 and these vehicles that are now coming at a base standard of 300 miles, that's a pretty good distance, right? Like, people say, well, I need more, and I don't want to wait half an hour to charge. But, if you take a road trip, and I would say the majority of people do this, I can't drive more than 2 or 3 hours without having to stop. Like whether
Mhm.
it's a bio break and a leg stretch or grabbing a coffee and a meal or whatever, I need that 15 to 20 minute stop minimum anyway. Even if you stop
Hmm.
to pump gas and you get a coffee, that's going to take you 10 to 15 minutes, right? It's hard to just, if you've got what we call a case of gotta get there-itis, then maybe don't look at an EV, right? Get your gas burner and go. Get a diesel and go, stop less. But um, for those that are interested in helping out the planet, then the full electrics, there's a lot of compelling choices out there that do provide pretty good charging speeds. And if you can find some of those ultra fast for the non-Tesla variants, they'll crank up pretty good. So, but with Tesla, they just make it easy. So that's one thing about, I look at the Model 3 as kind of like the easy button for EVs, right? If you use that analogy, because I just don't think about anything. I just get in and go. And yes, we've got boombox and all these other cool things that we can do. And I was freaking out my mom today with the Darth Vader kind of voice from Sentry Mode today, because we just got that update over the holiday update. So I was playing around with that. She goes, "Your car's talking to me." I said, "Is it really?" Yeah. Hiding in a corner. So it's got some cool tricks, but it's just one of those vehicles. And I think that that's where we're going with EVs, is that OEMs need just to build something that has enough range and a good fast charging and good charging curve to get you for road trips. But your daily use cases, you just get in, plug in at night, and don't think about it, just like your phone. Get in and then just get in and drive the next day. You've got all the great tech and all the other stuff that come with it, the handling and performance and all the other safety elements, that come with that. So I think you're in the right part of the marketplace looking at those models. So
we just want to see what your interactions are like, since you do a lot of outreach in both the US and Canada. What's the differences between the populations there and the reactions you have with people, or is it pretty similar?
it's very similar because we are both driving culture oriented societies
Mm,
here, especially, because we have such larger distances to cover in general. I'm sure I can say it for your area, but for here, people, because of the housing prices, when you're into a major metro center, they get crazy. So people just
mm-hmm,
continue to go out and out and out to find affordable housing. So it's not uncommon for people that work in Toronto to be driving an hour and a half to 2 hours each way into work, right? Or,
mm,
if they can take transit, great, but we don't have transit that covers everything. So we're used to driving as a culture, whereas in Europe, a lot of places it's a little bit different, where, you know, they're fine with 100-mile range or something like that because they're not doing that kind of driving. So I think our wants and needs are very similar from a Canadian perspective than it is to US. We did I think we were more into hatchbacks and kind of more economy type vehicles in the past than our neighbors south of the border were. But as I mentioned earlier, I think that that has changed because, again, the number one, the best selling vehicles here echo what's the best selling vehicles in the US are. And
Mm.
it's SUVs and pickup. You go to a Costco parking lot, 9 cars out of 10 are going to be an SUV or a pickup truck. And when I say SUV, you've got CUVs, small, medium, large, got that whole range because there's just so many out there, and that's what people are buying. So I think we have very similar needs as far as the public view goes, and even in Canada, it's because we're that driving culture. It's that education awareness. Yeah, but like I drive 2 hours a day, and you guys get cold temperatures like we do here. It's not uncommon to get, for you guys, probably minus 10 F or something like that Fahrenheit, maybe minus 20. I mean, when we get these Arctic bubbles or whatever they are that don't want to go away, we get that here too, and that can really be challenging, even on a product like Tesla. It's not uncommon to see 40% range drop, right, in really cold temps. So having to understand that what's your worst, on a worst case scenario, what kind of mileage can you live with? Well, I can live with, I only drive 120 miles. Well, then you've got a large selection of vehicles that'll get you through that today, and it's only going to get better, right, as we talked about. So I think our views are very similar, and when I do speak to people, it's very similar pushback. Well, range anxiety to a point, but then charging infrastructure and then the price point as well,
Mm.
because we haven't hit cost parity, as you guys know, and we're
Yeah.
still several years away. 2025 is what I'm hearing, but from most analysts, but it's still, we could be plus or minus a little bit on that.
Yeah.
I would love to see, you can buy here, a fully loaded Civic for 30 grand and a very nice vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And for 30 grand, you can't buy much of an EV, if anything,
No.
right? So it's a different ball game, right? And that's the perception. We need to talk to people, look at total cost of ownership, and look at this other stuff. And if somebody's just flipping cars every 2 years, then go to the next person that isn't, because an EV may not be the best choice for them if they're just looking at that, right? Or it could be. So I think our viewpoints, Alex, are very similar. We are seeing adoption. I think we might hit 6 to 7% as a national number here in Canada. I think you guys might be pushing closer to 10%. I'm not sure for EV adoption. I haven't seen the final plug-in numbers yet.
Yeah, I haven't either. Do you know, Brandon?
I'm not sure. I thought we were just past 6%
Yeah,
last
so
year, so I think we're getting up there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're very much similar. So, and again, part of it needs to also translate down to the supporting dealer networks, right? So
Mhm.
what Tesla has their own, and that's all they do. So they'll preach, all electrics till they're blue in the face, but we need the Ford, the GMs, and we need those local dealers to buy in, and we need them to stop marking up vehicles, like the Mach-E story and stuff, right?
Yep.
But we need them to stop doing that, because that's just going to throw a wrench into the adoption and smear the public perception of EVs. So we really need them to all get in line. And I think that's going to shake out this year. I think we'll see that the guys that are really getting behind it are going to get behind it and start promoting it. So hopefully that answers your question in a long-winded way. And I go back to, I think the F-150 Lightning is really that vehicle that's going to surprise a lot of people. That's going to say, whoa, I can still tow, because most people, they got to pick up, want to tow something, they want to pull
Yep.
or carry something on them, right? So if they can do the same kind of things they could do before and have those options, which will slowly roll out, and then the consumer guys, they're a no-brainer. They'll say, well, geez, for fleets, like the money that we'll save on the operating costs over 10 years, like why wouldn't we, right? So I think that's what's really going to surprise a lot of people is, and I think it is, like the Cybertruck is cool and it got a lot of eyeballs, and yes, there's a lot of reservations, 8 billion or 80 billion or something they have on the book for that, for orders in. But what's really the heart of the matter is that 150, and you've got the Silverados and the Denalis and the Rams, and all these guys are going to come out with stuff that are equivalent to the use case that a pickup truck uses today, that what a farmer needs and a guy that's working on construction on the side. They need it for different reasons than you or I. So it's going to be an exciting year for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, Ken, before you wrap up, can you tell our listeners where they can find you on YouTube as well as like other social platforms?
Absolutely, yeah. I get to plug myself one last second for sure.
Yeah.
So my YouTube channel it's easy to find, EV Revolution Show. Just type that in, it'll come up. On Twitter, my handle is at EV Rev Show. I am on Instagram with the EV Revolution Show handle, but I'm very lax with Instagram. It's just a secondary. Twitter's my main kind of push when I'm not on YouTube. I don't have Facebook or anything, so those are really the main social platforms, and the YouTube channel is easy to find. And you might hear me on a local radio from here time to time here in Toronto. I'm on 640 once in a while, and getting out there with EVS and talking to people at different shows and events too, and doing webinars and things like that. So
awesome. Well,
easy
thank
to
you so
find me.
much, Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like
And
it.
I am on LinkedIn too, so
Oh, yeah.
under my real name. So yeah, for sure.
If you got any notifications, I think both of us were looking at your profile. So
Okay.
we're prepping for today.
Yeah, for work at LinkedIn, it really proves itself. And I've been doing IT sales for 30 some odd years, so that's kind of what I do for a real job and for my background. So the YouTube stuff is just I'm passionate about the movement and trying to help move the yardsticks forward on that. So do my little bit. Yep.
Cool. Well, go check out Ken all over social media with EV Revolution Show. Thanks again for being on, and we'll catch you all in the next episode.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.